So many Scottish stories come from the farm, and I picture the farm on a craggy, rocky coastline, and that's where this one happens. And it's a story about an old woman who lives on the farm, and everybody around there knows her. And if you were there, you'd know her too. Some people call her Ma, some people call her Auntie, but the really lucky ones, they call her grandmother. And one night, in the middle of the night, she was having a dream. And in her dream, she was out in the garden tending to the vegetables, potatoes, tomatoes, cabbages, and carrots, picking and weeding away, when all of a sudden, the garden gate creaked open real loud, and it gave her a bit of a shock, a bit of a start. She stared, turned, and looked over at the garden gate, and there, standing there, was this tiny, tiny little man, only a couple inches tall, and he had a big red beard and a shock of red hair. Some people call him the brownies or bed knocks, but we just like to call him the wee folk. And he said to her, "I'm sorry to startle you. I didn't mean to scare you. I really didn't. I just want to say how much I appreciate all the hard work you do here in the garden. And I want you to know that on the other side of that tree, right over there, buried down about 3 feet deep, is an old mason jar. And inside that mason jar is an old-fashioned key. And if you find that key, well, then the next time I see you, I'll tell you where the box is that opens it, that it opens. And that key is the only thing that can open that box. And what's inside that box will change your life forever." Well, now, as soon as he was finished saying that, she woke up. And assuming that it was just a dream, she just rolled over and went back to sleep. But the next day after breakfast, when she was out in the yard doing her work and sort of tending to the vegetables out in the garden, weeding and whatnot in amongst the potatoes, tomatoes, cabbages, and carrots, she kept looking over at that tree. Before she knew it, there she was round the other side of that tree, down on her knees with her sleeves pushed up to her elbows. And she started digging and digging and digging. And sure enough, about 2-3 feet deep, she found a mason jar. And inside that mason jar was an old-fashioned key. Well, she couldn't believe it. So she ran back to the house to tell her family all about it. And she told them about the dream, about the wee little man, about what he had said, and about this box, and how a few pieces of gold or silver would help so much at the farm, and how she found the key and everything. And they said, "Really?" They said, I don't like the sound of that." They said, "We like the life we have." And then they said, "Besides, what if the change is for the worse?" Well, that night, she couldn't get to sleep, not even for trying. She tossed and turned, wondering if she'd have another dream, wondering if she'd see that guy, thinking about that box, thinking about what might be in there, thinking about how much some pieces of gold and silver would help around the farm, but also thinking about what her family had said. Now, eventually she fell asleep. Eventually, we all do. And that night, in the middle of the night, she had another dream. And in her dream, she was once again out in the garden, picking and weeding in amongst the potatoes, tomatoes, cabbages, and carrots, when all of a sudden, the garden gate creaked open again, louder than before. And again, it gave her, a bit of a shock, a bit of a start, and she looked, and sure enough, there was that tiny wee little man again. And he said, "Hey, I'm sorry to startle you. I'm sorry to scare you. That wasn't my intent. I just want to say, well done." He said, "Good for you." He said, "I know you found that key buried around the other side of that tree over there." And he said, "I just want you to know that on this side of that same tree, buried at the same depth as that box," he said, "that key, your key, is the only thing that can open that box." And then he said, "What's inside that box will change your life forever." And again, as soon as he was done saying that, she woke up. Only this time, assuming it wasn't just a dream, she couldn't get back to sleep. She tossed and turned for the rest of the night. And then that day, around the breakfast table, she told her family, she said, I saw him again. He came back to me in a dream. He told me where the box is. She was so excited. She said, if I can open that box and if there's some gold or some silver in there, it'll help so much around the farm. It'll be good for us. And they said, really? They said, I don't like the sound of it. They said, we like the life we have. And they said, besides, what if that change is for the worse? Well, that afternoon when she was out in the garden doing her chores, picking and weeding amongst the vegetables, the potatoes, tomatoes, cabbages and carrots, she kept looking over at that tree. Before she knew it, she was over there, down on her knees right in front of the tree with her sleeves pushed up to her elbows, thinking about what might be down there, thinking about what might be in that box, thinking about how much that gold and silver would help her on the farm. But also, again, thinking about what her family had said. When all of a sudden, the garden gate creaked open again, louder than ever before, in real time or dream time. And it gave her such a shock, such a start, that she fainted right there on the spot. Now, I don't know how long she was out. I don't know if it was 5 minutes or 5 hours. But when she came to, when she woke up, the first thing on her mind, the first thing she thought, the first thing off her lips was, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to take that kind of risk. I'm not going to take that kind of chance. And so she took the key and she hung it on a nail right inside the garden gate. And for years and years and years, she never ever told anyone. She told that story over and over. She never ever told anyone where that box was said to be buried or where she hid the key. And that woman is my hero because she decided that finding the story was better than finding the treasure, or that perhaps finding the story was indeed finding the treasure. And for me, that's the key to good storytelling. Thanks again for having me here today. Thank you all for being here, and thank you so much for listening.